Hello, I'm Shane M. Nygaard, and welcome to the Eighth House, Shades of Inheritance, Reflections on Mid-Afternoon Shadows. This is a short look at a particular way of working with the eighth house of an astrology chart. For some background on how I'm approaching the houses in this series, please see my houses introduction from Sunrise Through Nightfall, the first in this house's playlist. One thing I'll always return to, and here start off with, is psychologist Carl Jung's direction to stick with the image. This is especially on point for astrology, which is filled with imagery. This is my favorite Jung quote because there's just so much to it. Sticking with the image is sticking with the imagination, the imagination. It's how we look at and perceive everything. He also said, image is psyche. So we see when we're imagining, sticking with the image, we're active in psyche's world. And with psyche as the Greek word for soul, we can understand when we're imagining, we're ensouled. That's huge, and huge for astrology too, because when we stick with the astrological images and really work with them, our astrology is ensouled. So we have multiple images and perspectives from which to understand the houses. And for the eighth house, it's been named Other People's Resources. It deals with themes around death and rebirth and transformation. It's referred to as epicataphora or casting down. It's inactive. It's the gate, the entrance of Hades. The medical world associates it with the uterus, the prostate, and the bladder. And then, of course, legacy, and notably for this presentation, inheritance. There's a lot of depth and complexity about this house, and it's considered one of the most complex houses. So when we stick with the images of the times of day associated with each house, we find the houses divided into equal 2-hour blocks, which creates a 24-hour day. This starts at 6 a.m. at the ascendant and progresses clockwise. In this view, the eighth house is at the 2 to 4 p.m. point in the afternoon. And this is when the afternoon sun takes on a particular angle, throwing shadows into our lives. Let's explore. I'm especially drawn to this way of looking at the houses as I'm a photographer. And Michael Freeman's book, Capturing Light, The Heart of Photography, has helped inform my imagining the houses as much as it's informed my photography. In Capturing Light, Freeman describes the 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock p.m. hours as the most difficult for photographers. The angle of the lighting, like you'll see if you watch the 11th house video I have in the series, it's considered hard lighting. Though, as differentiated from the 11th house quality of light, this time of day, its quality is described as unspecial, unkind, and ugly, creating dense shadows, hard edges, and high contrast for subjects being photographed. I mean, with the complexity and depth of the eighth house, Freeman could be describing the eighth house with these adjectives. Here we see the light dramatically in this photo. It's hard to look at. I mean, if this was real life, could you look up to see the person who was running across the bridge there if they call to you? You'd need to look down, a signature of the depths of the eighth house, and perhaps indicative of epicataphora, casting down. But Freeman further explains, however, Angular objects tend to do better with lighting that shows off their hard edges and contrasting surfaces. When it's right for the subject, the effect is strong and eye-catching. If we consider the planets in the eighth house as angular objects, as they are positioned in the afternoon's angled light, this suggests they perhaps do better with or require expression through certain hard-edged and high-contrast situations. I mean, consider people with notable eighth house placements are inherently designed, question mark, to tackle life's hard edges and contrasting surfaces. I mean, take this as metaphorically as you can. Unlike Rosalind here, who I suspect probably doesn't have much going on in her eighth house, which is where the quality of light brings an understanding that with planets in our eighth house, we're wired to be able to, even if learned over time, deal with themes, issues, and situations others struggle to navigate or simply avoid. Further imagery of the afternoon sun, which can be awesome. And as we can see with the angular sun, its light creates particular shadows, very fitting of the eighth house. Shadows is seen in the image on the title slide of this presentation, which is a graveyard or a cemetery, a place for those who have passed, shades of the past. Stick with me here as we take an eighth house descent, and we'll look at some linguistics. We'll go step by step, with first recognizing shadow, defined as dark image cast by someone or something when interposed between an object and a source of light. But we did see this in the sun lighting imagery as shadows are created. Further, a shadow is anything unreal, as a ghost. Remember this. And of course, shadows give us shade, with shade defined as how light or dark, or as distinguished from one nearly like it. But also, again, we see here a ghost. A shade is a term for a ghost. And even further, there's the expression shades of something, to invoke or acknowledge a memory from the ghost sense, shadows and shades as ghosts and memories. I mean, do you see where we're going here? Let's continue to inheritance, shades of inheritance, to make someone an heir, or to get by succession as representative of the former possessor. Imagine how this connects us with shadows and shades, memories and ghosts of the past who have passed. And lastly, consider occult, also very important here, of involving or relating to supernatural, mystical, or magical powers or phenomena, and hidden, concealed, and secret, and also, importantly, not apprehended by the mind, beyond the range of understanding. And I think this is part of what makes the eighth house so challenging. It's a supernatural and mystical house when we consider we're in the realm of ghosts and shades of the past, especially with the eighth house as other people's resources. I mean, it's not our own family ghosts per se, not restricted to our own lineages, but where eighth house placements could be guided toward the ghosts and shadows of those that have come before, related to what this house is about in our own chart. So the legacy of others, the various shades of inheritance we reveal here. So what does this mean? Let's see through our chart examples, particularly of those who have passed. As the house that is a gate of Hades, the Greek mythic god of the underworld, we're at his gates. It's a house of descent, of casting down our vision, or ourselves, metaphorically, to the past. Let's enter and descend where we meet mythic Charon, the ferryman of the underworld. We must pay our coin, our symbol, our connection of the material world, pay our homage to the past, and cross the river Styx. The river Styx, mythically, is a boundary river between the living and the dead. This is a supernatural or mystical engagement with the shades of the past, where we can look to Terrence McNally, described in the New York Observer as the bard of American theater and one of the greatest contemporary playwrights the theater world has yet produced. Saturn in Aries in the 8th. With the initiatory nature of Aries, McNally was notably the first to really dive into gay representation on the Broadway stage in a significant way. But also, beyond gay, he wrote of the struggles and the challenges and hardships we all face with intimacy, with connecting deeply with others. Things we may find it easier to turn away from. Very 8th house, very Saturn. Wrong way. Descend further. Notably, Frankie and Johnny in the Clair de Lune, about two very lonely souls after sex, debating about entering a deeper relationship with each other, to connect or settle into the isolation and loneliness they already live with. There's Kiss of the Spider Woman, based on the Manuel Puig novel about two prisoners in Argentina, their deepening relationship, and the character Molina's fantasies of movie star Aurora, who is notable for her role as the Spider Woman who kills with her kiss. Hello, images of the vampire and the deadly Black Widow spider fill Molina's imagination, archetypes that are right at home in the 8th house. And we'll just mention The Visit, an adaptation of Friedrich Dürrenmatt's 1956 play about the wages of sin in a capitalist world. I mean, sounds very Saturnian, and Saturn in the 8th. And to dive into the shadow. I mean, amazingly, the set for this production was described as creepily beguiling looking. It suggested a long abandoned train station where you can buy a ticket straight to hell. I mean, well, that's a descent into the underworld if I ever heard one. But McNally stuck with the image, and we all reap the benefits and rewards of this harvest, as do generations yet to come. But let's really look deeper at this, and we'll look at it through his play Masterclass, his masterful piece about opera diva, opera legend Maria Callas, herself now a shade of the past. As Callas teaches young, naive opera soprano Sophie, she shares how her music scores are for her like her connection to the past. She says, you should see my scores. They're covered with pencil marks. And I'm not going to do a Maria Callas impersonation here, just not in my skill set. You can hardly see the music. I wrote down everything, every hint, every trick, every suggestion. Like a sponge I was. You have to be like a sponge, absorb, absorb. So then there's this amazingly impactful line. These are centuries of opera we're talking about here, eh? We don't make this stuff up, this music up. The notes, the phrasing, we're talking about tradition. Tradition is the way things have been done over time, even across generations past. So as Callas continues to teach Sophie, she references Bellini's La Sonnambula and Norma and asks Sophie, do you know who created created Anna? Sorry. Do you know who created Amina? The same soprano who created Norma. Pasta, Giuditta Pasta. When you sing this music, I want to hear all the links that take you back to her. This is the realm of it, my words, not the script. This is the realm of inheritance, inheritance from the shades of the past, or in this case, the shades of the pasta. She continues, I want to hear Callas. I want to hear Milanov. I want to hear Poncel. I want to hear Lehman. I want to hear pasta. I mean, this script, we're descending deeper into the eighth house and the ghosts and the shades. I want to hear you, a straight line from you through me to pasta. Eh? How can you sing this music and not know who pasta was? Shame, Sophie, shame. Callas, Milanov, Poncel, Lehman, pasta. Sophie is utterly naive to the riches she could inherit to truly bring depth and meaning and soul to her singing. When we talk about death, rebirth, and transformation with the eighth house, how often do we hear this as our death, our rebirth, our transformation? Yet, this is the house of other people's resources and inheritance. What we hear from Maria Callas, or more literally, Terrence McNally, is we must descend into the underworld of the past of those shades, and there, their mystical lineage. And through us, we rebirth them back into the world and are also ourselves thus transformed. Maria wants to hear pasta, Giuditta Pasta, the originator of the role centuries ago, but through Sophie. If you have strong eighth house placements, who, what, or where do you connect to the shades, the shadows? What inheritance comes into this world through you? And also, as Callas herself further describes, I just have to share this, it's so amazing. You have to listen to something in yourself to sing this difficult music. When I sang Medea, I could feel the stones of Epidaurus beneath the wooden floorboards at La Scala. I was standing where Medea, Electra, Clytemnestra had stood. There was a direct line through me to the composer, to Euripides, to Medea herself. These people really existed. Medea, Lady Macbeth? Or don't you believe that, eh? This is all make-believe to you? We can hear in these words that mystical and supernatural quality about the eighth house and really descending as far back as we can. I mean, Callas, she inherited it all, brought it through her into the world anew, and left the richest of legacies. By tapping into such lineage, Callas became a legend, and Terrence McNally really captured this depth and this quality of her in Masterclass. I mean, Terrence McNally, we could even say his masterclass is a masterclass of the eighth house, animating Maria Callas in a masterful way. So for our second and final chart, another example of how the death, rebirth, and transformation of the eighth house is not strictly our own, and how these shadows and shades of this time of day really influence a life and a perspective and a chart. Charles Baudelaire, for example. I mean, dude's got some dense shadows and high contrast around those eyes. Baudelaire was a 19th century French poet, writer, and critic, most known for his collection of poetry, Les Fleurs du Mal, the flowers of evil. He had Sun and Saturn in his eighth house, though even here, when you just look at the chart, as Venus, Jupiter, and Chiron are technically in the seventh, nevertheless, the angular objects are still in the afternoon's angled light, and Baudelaire's intensity and focus remains. Here are a couple visual examples of his works where we can judge books by their covers. The dark shadows and high contrast aesthetics resonate with his chart, very fitting. And when we consider Les Fleurs du Mal, specifically, it's a collection of 160 poems expressing, quote, the changing nature of beauty in the rapidly industrializing Paris during Baudelaire's life. Think about it. This shift, this death, rebirth, and transformation of society from Romanticism to industrialization shows a changing aesthetic, keenly observed by Baudelaire through the hard and difficult light of the eighth house, where Romanticism focused on the natural world, emotional and physical passion, and an interest in the mystical and supernatural. Industrialism, however, brought out the hard edges, dense shadows, and high contrast of new coal mines, steel mills, assembly lines, and textile factories. I mean, really, with his intense eighth house, Baudelaire was innately and keenly oriented to capture the shifting, shadowy aesthetics of his time. He stuck with the image as it shifted, and we inherit his exceptionally shadowy poetry. So thank you for watching and reflecting with me on the shadowy nature of the eighth house as informed by the mid-afternoon sun's hard lighting and dense shadows. Check out my other houses videos in the playlist as they are posted, and let me know your own thoughts and reflections in the comments. Cheers.